The grand chamber of the Valari Dominion was a cavernous expanse of obsidian and bioluminescent crystal, a testament to 10,000 cycles of unbroken conquest, where the air itself seemed heavy with the gravity of absolute authority. High Exarch Kael'thas sat upon the throne of whispers, his multifaceted eyes scanning the holographic projection that dominated the center of the room, a shimmering sphere of light that displayed the edge of their sovereign territory. Around him, the Council of War stood in varying states of agitation, their mandibles clicking in a rhythm that betrayed both annoyance and amusement. The subject of their scrutiny was a single, solitary vessel that had drifted into the contested sector of the Grendel Expanse, a region the Dominion had claimed by right of superior firepower cycles ago. The vessel was an affront to their aesthetic sensibilities, a blocky, ungraceful hunk of dull gray metal that lacked the sleek, predatory curves of Valari warships or the crystalline elegance of the subjugated Itari fleets. It sat motionless against the backdrop of the swirling nebula, emitting no aggressive scans, no shield harmonics, and most insultingly, no recognition of the Dominion's repeated hails demanding its immediate surrender. To the Valari, who measured worth in energy output and hull geometry, this object was barely a ship. It was a cosmic joke, a piece of drifting refuse that had somehow forgotten to disintegrate. General Zarog, a towering figure clad in battle plate forged from the remnants of conquered worlds, stepped forward, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the floor plates. He gestured dismissively at the hologram, his clawed hand passing through the image of the human ship. He argued that it was a waste of the Council's time to even debate the presence of such a primitive construct, suggesting it was likely an automated probe from a dying civilization, a last gasp of a species that had never achieved true FTL capability. He pointed out the visible rivets, the external piping, the utter lack of hyperdimensional maneuvering thrusters. In his eyes, it was a target that barely warranted the expenditure of a single plasma torpedo. However, the High Exarch was not so easily swayed by mere appearances, though his arrogance was no less profound. Kael'thas had not maintained his grip on the Dominion by ignoring anomalies, yet even he struggled to find a reason to fear this silent, drifting brick. The silence of the vessel was what irked him most. It was not the silence of a predator waiting to strike, but the silence of a stone, indifferent and immovable. The debate in the chamber shifted from caution to mockery as the hours wore on, the atmosphere thick with the scent of ozone and pheromones. Strategist Lyra, the only voice of relative temperance, suggested that the lack of energy readings might be a form of stealth technology they had not yet encountered, a masking field that hid the ship's true capabilities. Her suggestion was met with a chorus of derisive chittering from the admirals, who reminded her that the Dominion's sensors could detect the heartbeat of a prey species from orbit. They boasted of the armada currently stationed in the Grendel Expanse, a fleet of 300 capital ships, each capable of glassing a continent, supported by thousands of drone fighters. The idea that a single ship, roughly the size of a Valari heavy cruiser but with none of the weaponry, could pose a threat to such a force was ludicrous. The political tension in the room was not about the threat, but about the insult. The Dominion demanded acknowledgement, fear, and submission. This silent ship offered none. It simply existed in their space, defying their borders by merely being there. Kael'thas, feeling the pressure of his generals' bloodlust, finally made the decision that would echo through the annals of galactic history. He ordered the 7th Armada to remove the obstruction, not to capture it, not to study it, but to vaporize it as a message to whatever primitive species had dared to send their trash into Valari space. The command was relayed instantaneously across the void, received by Fleetmaster Vruk on the bridge of the Sovereign's Will, a dreadnought of terrifying proportions. Vruk, a veteran of the suppression campaigns in the Outer Rim, looked at the sensor readings of the human ship and felt a pang of disappointment. He had hoped for a fight, for a glorious skirmish to earn him another commendation, but this was execution duty. The human ship, identified in the databank simply as unknown configuration, sat motionless as the Valari Armada broke formation and encircled it. The sheer scale of the Dominion fleet was breathtaking, a glittering wall of war machines that blotted out the stars, their weapons charging with the violent blue glow of antimatter projectors. Vruk ordered a final hail, a formality required by protocol, demanding the vessel power down its reactor and prepare for boarding, though he knew they would likely just destroy it. The response, when it finally came, was not a plea for mercy, nor a defiant scream of war. It was a text transmission translated by the ship's AI into the Valari trade tongue. It was simple, calm, and utterly confusing. It read, "This vessel is the Terra Nova. We are conducting a gravitational stability test. Please clear the area to a distance of 1 light second. Thank you for your cooperation." Vruck stared at the message, his mandibles twitching in disbelief. The audacity was staggering. A single primitive ship ordering an Imperial armada to move. The bridge crew of the Sovereign's Will laughed, a harsh, guttural sound that rippled through the fleet comms. They interpreted the message as the delusion of a malfunctioning AI or the bluff of a suicidal captain. Vruck, insulted by the dismissal, ordered the fleet to open fire. He wanted to see the metal box turn into molten slag. He gave the command, and the void lit up with the fury of the Dominion. Hundreds of antimatter beams, plasma torpedoes, and kinetic railgun slugs converged on the Terra Nova in a blinding conflagration of energy. The sensors on the Sovereign's Will were momentarily blinded by the intensity of the impact, the sheer amount of ordnance enough to crack a small moon. The crew waited for the debris field to appear on their scanners, ready to chart a course through the wreckage and return to their patrol. But as the energy dissipated and the sensors cleared, the laughter on the bridge died instantly. The Terra Nova was still there. It had not moved. It had not raised shields. There was no glowing barrier of energy, no deflection field. The hull was simply untouched. The gray metal looked exactly as it had before, not even scorched. The sensor officers frantically recalibrated their instruments, insisting that there must be a glitch, that the ship must be a ghost image, but the mass readings confirmed it was solid. The energy of the bombardment had not been deflected. It had been absorbed. The rivets and piping that General Zarog had mocked began to glow with a soft, rhythmic golden light, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. On the bridge of the Sovereign's Will, Vruck felt a cold knot of dread form in his gut. He ordered a second volley, this time at maximum yield. The fleet unleashed everything they had, a storm of destruction that would have stripped the atmosphere from a habitable world. Again, the fire washed over the human ship, and again, the Terra Nova drank it in. The golden light intensified, shifting from a soft pulse to a steady, blinding radiance that began to outshine the local star. Then the Terra Nova spoke again. The voice was audio this time, broadcasting on all frequencies, bypassing the Dominion's encryption with terrifying ease. It was a human voice, calm, weary, and tinged with a profound sadness. "We warned you. The energy density in this sector is now critical. We are initiating the dampening field to prevent a local space-time collapse. Your weapons are feeding the instability. Cease fire immediately, or we will be forced to neutralize your kinetic potential." Vruck, panicked and furious, unable to comprehend a foe that could eat antimatter, screamed for the fleet to close distance and use gravity crushers. He could not accept that his armada, the pride of the Dominion, was being lectured by a golden brick. The ships moved in, their engines flaring, closing the net. The reaction from the Terra Nova was instantaneous and clinically precise. It did not fire a beam. It did not launch missiles. Instead, the golden light that wreathed the hull expanded outward in a sphere, passing through the approaching Valeri ships like a phantom wind. There was no explosion, no violent shuddering. As the light passed over the Sovereign's Will, Vruck watched his control consoles go dark. The hum of the reactor died. The artificial gravity failed, leaving the crew floating in the sudden silence of a dead ship. But it was worse than a simple power outage. The molecular bonds of the weapon systems, and only the weapon systems, simply unraveled. The antimatter projectors dissolved into dust. The railgun barrels crumbled like dry sand. Across the entire armada, 300 capital ships were instantly and surgically disarmed. They were not destroyed. The life support systems remained active, the hulls were intact, but every offensive capability was turned into metallic powder floating in the corridors. In the grand chamber of the Valeri Dominion, the holographic feed from the fleet cut to static, then returned via backup emergency buoy. The Council watched in horrified silence as their mighty armada drifted helplessly, reduced to toothless hulks. The Terra Nova, now glowing with the stored energy of 1,000 suns, began to shift. The blocky exterior panels folded back, revealing a core of crystalline machinery far more advanced than anything the Valeri had ever conceived. It was not a warship. It was a piece of engineering infrastructure. The realization hit strategist Lyra first, and she fell to her knees, her voice trembling. "It's not a weapon," she whispered. "It's a heatsink. They sent a heatsink." The humans had absorbed the fleet's firepower not to charge a weapon, but simply to store the energy. A final transmission arrived from the human vessel, directed to the High Exarch himself. The hologram shifted to display the face of a human captain, an older woman with eyes that held the weight of centuries. She did not look angry. She looked like a teacher disappointed in a student. "High Exarch," she began, her voice echoing in the silent chamber. "Your species is young, and your grasp of the fundamental forces is enthusiastic, if misguided. You occupy a region of space that sits upon a fault line of reality. We are the Solstice Engineering Corps. We are here to stitch a tear in the fabric of the universe that, if left unchecked, would consume your entire empire. Your weapons fire has provided the necessary activation energy for our repair drones, so we thank you for the contribution, though we would have preferred a donation less violent." The twist of the knife was not military defeat, but the sudden, crushing perspective of scale. The humans were not conquerors, they were maintenance workers. The Dominion, which believed itself the apex of civilization, was merely an infestation of ants on a construction site. The human captain continued, "We have disabled your fleet to ensure our work proceeds without further interruption. Their systems will reset in 3 standard cycles. We suggest you use that time to reflect on the nature of power. True power is not the ability to destroy Exarch. It is the ability to fix what is broken. We will be leaving once the fault line is sealed. Do not follow us. You are not ready for the deep void." The transmission ended, and the Terra Nova released the stored energy in a focused beam, not at the fleet, but into the empty darkness of space behind them. The fabric of reality seemed to tear, and then heal, a jagged wound of purple light sutured shut by the golden beam. The sensors in the grand chamber registered a gravitational stabilization that their scientists had deemed theoretically impossible. The threat had saved them from a cosmic catastrophe they hadn't even known existed. As the human ship folded its panels back into its unassuming, blocky shape and engaged an engine drive that defied physics, simply vanishing without a warp signature, the High Exarch sat slumped on his throne of whispers. The silence in the chamber was absolute. The fear of the humans was gone, replaced by something far more terrifying, the realization of their own insignificance. They had not been defeated by a warrior. They had been gently pushed aside by a gardener tending to a much larger, more important forest. And in the dark silence of the chamber, the Valeri realized that the universe was far vaster and far stranger than their conquests could ever encompass.